Hi, everybody. So as we know with all of these driven development type approaches, it's just a gathering together of best practice that we've seen across the industry over many years. So punishment-driven development, I did want to call it blame-driven development, but apparently BDD is already used. So an example of punishment-driven development in the BDD form. So given the team isn't delivering fast enough, when you've told them the delivery date over and over again, then they need to be punished with no bonus, bad performance reviews. So this face is one that we've seen over and over again. This is the manager who something's gone wrong in live. It's all fallen over, and the first question they ask is who's to blame? Who caused this? Who didn't do their job? We all know that actually the answer is it's not about who's to blame, it's about what we can learn from this, but that's not what the manager wants to hear. There was one apocryphal tale, it's true, it's just that I wasn't there at the time, in my current company with a previous CIO called Jeff. And apparently Jeff used to go and stand behind the chair of whoever was trying to fix whatever live issue had happened at the moment. And he would shout at that person until it was fixed in live. I'm sure that was really helpful and useful. So we're going to talk about these kinds of ways of working and how useful they are. First of all, we have a challenge. I need a volunteer, and given we've got one person in the front row of each, maybe you're them, for each side. So your challenge is to be the first one. So everyone on your side has one card and all the other cards are back with me. So you're in competition with each other, just so I'd make that clear. We're going to punish whoever loses. I'm not sure this is the most efficient method. I'm just... an adaptation in methods. Volunteer helping out the volunteer. Oh, you're trying to win on this side. Look at this. Oh, despite all the good work going on over here, I'm afraid you guys are going to have to be punished because these guys have all got their cards. Has everybody got a card? Anyone not got a card? Perfect. Thank you. So, the reason we have these cards is because this is interactive, but obviously being software people, we don't want to actually have to speak much in our interaction, so that's what your cards are for. And I'm going to do an experiment. This experiment comes in 5 parts. We're going to do one part at a time. And this is to understand what your view is on the level of guilt that someone has, the level of responsibility they have for their actions, and how much they should be punished for those actions. So, the first part of this experiment. So, one side of your card is green. So, I need you to hold the green side up towards me if you think that it's low. Okay? So, when I say, how much should we blame this person, and you don't think they should be very blamed, then it's green. And if you think it's really their fault, then you hold the red side up towards me. Okay? So, let's start with the first part of the experiment. John is at a football game, or soccer if you're that way inclined, when he sees another fan called Steve, wearing a scarf supporting the opposing team. We all know this is unacceptable behaviour. John tells Steve to take the scarf off. Steve refuses, and so John hits him in the face. So, how blameworthy is John for that? How much is he to blame? If you think he's not much to blame, then it's green. If you think he's really to blame, then it's red. We've got one green. Ooh, okay. Quite a lot of red. I'm going to take that generally as a red, so we think he's highly to blame. So, how much should he be punished for this? Bear in mind, like the top of the scale is probably like the death penalty or something. Maybe 10 years in prison is mid between the green and the red. So, if we think he deserves 10 years in prison or more, it's probably red. And if we think it's 10 years or less, then it's green. So, how much punishment does he deserve? Green? I don't think there are any red. No death penalties? No? Okay. So I went out to people on my Facebook and Twitter feed and just sort of asked them these questions as well. And this is what they came up with. Now, I do know some really strange people, so I'm not saying this is representative at all. But we can see that generally people agreed with you guys. So very blameworthy, but not deserving of much punishment. This is just a bubble chart, biggest bubble, more people. Okay. Another way to punish people is with bonuses. I met a product manager at an Agile conference last year, and he was telling me about a great bonus scheme that he runs. So he's responsible for the bonus of the team that delivers to him. So what he does is he says, okay, I've got this bonus pot, and I'm going to split it amongst people, but I'm going to reduce it for every bug that we find in UAT. So if a particular developer and tester work together on a piece and we find more bugs in UAT, they will get less bonus. He was telling me what a great scheme this was, and it was all about rewarding people for doing a good job. It wasn't quite my gut reaction to it. So here are his team. Okay, I've imagined them. But first of all, we have Andy. So Andy, he's a new guy, straight from university. This is his first job. He's not been there very long. He's still learning how we work as an organization. He actually has no choice. He's doing the best job he can. He needs a lot of support. He can't choose to reduce the number of bugs because they're all mistakes. It's not a deliberate thing he's doing. He'll get better over time, but he can't choose to change his behavior to get this bonus. Then we have Betty. So at the moment, Betty's actually got lots of stuff going on outside of work. Her boyfriend left her recently. Her dad's really ill. She's coming in and she's doing the best job she can do right now, but work is not the topmost in her mind, and this bonus can make absolutely no difference to her work. We've then got Charlie. Now, Charlie's actually quite lazy. He comes in, he does the minimum he can do to get his job that he needs to do to just keep his job, keep the salary coming in. He thinks this is a great scheme. You know, he'll do some more work, and he'll get paid more for that. But you know, Charlie is also clever because he's worked out that the best way to get this bonus is to deliver no code. And then there are no bugs in life. So actually, what you need are stupid, lazy people if you want this bonus scheme to work. We then have Doris. Now, Doris is excellent, top of her game, works really hard, believes in quality, delivers to her utmost. She helps everybody else in the team to deliver. Now, she can't do any better than she's already doing. It will make no difference to her, except for the fact that there have been lots of studies that have shown that trying to introduce extrinsic motivation for something that people do intrinsically that they want to do because they want to do a good job actually reduces their performance. So the most likely outcome here is that her performance will reduce, probably because she's kind of offended by this bonus scheme. So all in all, to me, this isn't a bonus scheme, this isn't reward and recognition. This is actually punishing people. It's assuming people are lazy. It's assuming people will not deliver their best unless you actually pay them extra to do so. So why do we punish people? There are 4 reasons that I could think of. You guys might be able to share some more with me. So to put other people off from doing those things, so that that particular person will not do that thing again. For retribution, because we kind of feel good by punishing them, or to compensate the victim of whatever it is that they've done. So those are the 4 reasons. And we need to ask ourselves, when we punish people, which one of those 4 we're doing. And nearly every single time, you might be able to argue some of them, nearly every single time in the work environment, it's for retribution. That's my argument. Scenario 2 of the experiment. So John and Steve are hunting in the woods. Despite the fact that John has followed all of the safety rules, his shotgun misfires, and he accidentally hits Steve in the side, and Steve dies before John can fetch help. How blameworthy is John in this scenario? Green if not very, red if a lot. Okay, we've got some reds. mainly green, but still a good smattering of reds in there. And how much punishment does John deserve? Greens in most of the odd red? Okay. So generally we're saying that he's not very blameworthy and doesn't deserve much punishment, although there's a couple of people who disagree with that. And you can see that also ties up with my previous poll. We did have one person who said he was very guilty and deserved the death penalty, but generally people were sort of agreeing it was a lower level. Another way we punish people. So I worked with one team where there was this one developer in the team who was really not accepted by the rest of the team. They didn't want to work with him. They would just avoid having much to do with him if they could. He would ask the really stupid questions. You know, you get together with people who want the work, and he's asking really basic, stupid questions, just embarrassing to the team. And they would cut him off and kind of carry on with more appropriate conversations. And they would make decisions. They would sit and they would meet and talk, and they would make decisions about how they were going to do things. And he would go off and do something completely against the decisions that had been made. They didn't like him. They didn't want to work with him. He wasn't very quick if they were trying to throw ideas around. They didn't want to work with him. When we sat and actually worked together for a while, and we changed things so that when he was asking those questions, we stopped people cutting him off. So he was able to ask those questions, were able to be answered. What we found was that about a third of the time, those questions came up with fundamental problems with the way that they were thinking of approaching the code, that normally wasn't found till once things were there and things could be seen. Those questions were basic, but actually they were finding issues at a much earlier stage and were really valuable. Also, what we found was that for him, when a decision was made verbally, it didn't feel real. Just for him, a verbal conversation about it didn't feel concrete to him. But if you sent a quick email after a meeting and just said, these are the things we agreed during the meeting, he would absolutely stick to the decisions, because then it was written and he understood that that was a real decision that had been made. My argument here is that punishing him for being different is really short-sighted. When you've got that person in the team that you don't want to work with, they're probably the person who thinks really differently than you do. This is all about neurodiversity. They are probably bringing something to that team that no one else in that team is bringing. And punishing them for being different is actually punishing yourselves. So Freud had many theories. The one that didn't have anything to do with sex was narcissism of small differences. So what he said was, when we have lots of people who are like us, we have to find where the differences are between us and them so that we feel special. It also works in groups. So, you know, you have a lot of tribal things. This is my group. In order for me to be part of the open source community, there have to be people who are not part of it, and we have to define who is and who isn't. They might still be software developers, but hey, they're not us. And you get that, and you get that in teams, you get that between teams, you get that between departments. The ones they like to play at my particular organisation is Blame the BA. It's one of the favourite games that people like to play. And again, this is all about something's gone wrong, we haven't realised something was needed, let's find someone to blame for that. And actually, maybe it was the BA's fault, but that doesn't really matter. Did you ask the questions? Did you see early on that maybe some of these questions weren't being covered? And did you ask questions at that point? Did you insist that these questions are answered before you started writing the code, if you're one of the developers, before you started thinking about the testing? Or did you, excuse me, did you let them carry on and then just have someone to point the finger at afterwards? Scenario 3. John drives a security van containing money. Now we find out why John doesn't like Steve very much. Okay. One day Steve kidnaps John's daughter and threatens to kill her if John doesn't give Steve the money. John gives Steve the money from his van and his daughter is returned safely. So we want to know, how guilty is John of stealing that money. How blameworthy is John for stealing the money? So how much blame does he have, green or red? Okay, still mainly green, but there is a smattering of red in there as well. And how much punishment does he deserve for stealing that money? Okay, so more green that time. And I think that roughly agrees with what I have up here. We had a few people who were red for both, and the rest was sort of green, and down the bottom there. Oh, yes, but man, my favourite man. So one organisation I worked at, I worked mainly with the Java team. We were doing stuff that we needed to do. And I had to deal with the team leader of the COBOL team. So there were little changes that we needed in COBOL. And whenever we needed anything, he would always say, yes, absolutely, understand your day, understand when it's needed, we'll get that done for you. And I'd go back and then he'd say, why are you coming back? Why are you talking to me? Of course it's going to be ready by that time, not a problem. And I'd go back at that time and say, oh no, something far more important came up. I didn't do that stuff. And this happened over and over again, and stopped us from delivering what it was that we needed. So obviously this didn't make me very happy. And I had to stand back and sort of almost take my emotion out of that. The fact that he was letting me down wasn't the important thing. The thing I wanted out of this was for him to deliver what I wanted him to deliver. So I tried lots of different ways of trying to get him motivated to deliver this. Lots and lots. And in the end, I hit on something which worked. And that was, I effectively said to him, I'm so stupid. You're so amazing. I should have asked you before, but, you know, hey, I'm a bit ditzy. Could you please get this thing done for me? Oh, I'm so stupid. And then he did it, and he did it every single time. And he had that really sad, smirky smile on his face, and I'm thinking, you sad, sad man. But I got what I wanted out of that. I gave him what he needed, which was a hit to his ego, and he gave me what I needed, which was delivery of some COBOL code. So for me, that was successful. That gave me what I needed. So given that I'm into sort of lean and agile, I had to throw at least one word in here from Japanese. So we have hanzai, which is very much knowing yourself. Standing back from a situation when you think someone's really annoying, when you've got an emotional response in the workplace to something that someone has done, using that as a signal to stand back, understand yourself better, understand where you're going, why you've had that emotional response, and asking yourself, what do I actually want out of this situation? If I just go ahead and punish them from a retribution point of view, am I going to get what I want out of it? I might get that instant gratification of knowing I've punished them for their behaviour, but will I ever actually get what I need out of them in the workplace? Scenario 4. John planned to kill his mother for the inheritance. He dragged her to the bed, lit her oxygen mask with his cigarette, hoping to make it look like an accident. Her clothes caught fire and she burnt to death. He's a very pleasant guy, is John. So how blameworthy is John for this? Red. No greens? Oh. And how much punishment does he deserve? Again, pretty consistently red. And that pretty much agrees, although I did have one really worrying person who didn't think he was that blameworthy, really, but generally agrees with people. Okay, self-punishment. We all do this. I had one guy who, we had put a system live, and for various reasons, which I won't go into, the logon details on live had to be the same as the logon details in test. I won't go into it. And he accidentally went onto the live environment thinking he was on test, and he put a situation through, realized that's what he'd done, which meant somebody was going to get a new mortgage offer in the post, which they hadn't asked for, and ran up to the IT operations area and stopped that from going out. But he blamed himself so badly for having done this. He actually still has a big post-it note up on his desk saying, do not go on live. Now, this was a mistake. This wasn't deliberate. So how can you punish somebody for making a mistake? Because it's not like they can choose not to do it again. It was a mistake. Mistakes will happen. And what we did actually was share lots of stories of all the mistakes that we'd made and and that's nothing. You should hear what I did over here with this. You know, I sent out emails to 200 customers about something that wasn't even going to happen, you know, things like that. And I'm not sure that helped him, but it helped us. We all shared all the bad things we'd ever done. But also, the most important thing here is why? Why did he think that this was the same as test? What can we do to make it clear to somebody that this is not test? So this is the situation where you stand back and say, what are our levels of safety here? Why is the system in live the same colour as the system in test? Why aren't these guys just used to seeing a green screen and suddenly it's blue? And they say, oh, this isn't what I'm expecting while I'm doing my testing. The second and last Japanese word of the day is Kaizen, but going beyond the continuous improvement that Kaizen means to personal Kaizen. So knowing yourself with your hand side, knowing yourself, and then looking at how do I improve? How do I stand back? How do I take my emotions out of things, take away that punishment that I inherently want to do, and come back with something that's actually going to get me where I want to go. So, angry man. One organisation I joined, it was within my first couple of weeks at the organisation. There was a particular person who had a process problem. There was a lack of a process in the area. So we had conversations about that process and what we might do. So we had a meeting, about 10 of us, and we were looking at how we might deal with that process. So we'd come up with some ideas in my team and we were presenting those. And this guy got really angry. And it wasn't clear to me why he was getting angry. We weren't saying anything contentious. We were actually trying to solve a problem for him. But he got incredibly angry. And not only angry, but angry at me. And I didn't know why. First couple of weeks in the organisation, this guy is just, he's not shouting, but he is so controlling his voice because he wants to shout. So he's so in that angry place. And it's only me and him talking in the room. His boss is there, so it seems like this is perfectly reasonable behaviour. And at some point, he just sort of said, I've got to leave the room, and he left. And I kind of looked around everyone else in the room and said, what was that about? And everyone just said to me, I have no idea. That actually made me feel a little better, because at least it just wasn't me being completely stupid. But it didn't help me solve the problem. So what do you do in that situation when you've got someone who's really angry at you, you're very new in your job, you don't know why they're angry at you, and in fact, the more you think about it, the more their behaviour is actually quite unacceptable. So a lot of people I've spoken to about this say that what they would have done is gone up to him and sort of asked why he was angry and tried to work that through and understand what that was. I considered that. This was a first thing in the morning meeting. I spent the rest of the morning thinking about what I was going to do about this. But my feeling was that would just make him more angry. Whatever it was he was upset about, he would still be upset about. And that might actually make the situation worse. And so what I did, I went up to him in the afternoon. I gave him a bit of time. And I went up to him in the afternoon and I said to him, I have no idea what you are angry about this morning, but whatever it was, I'm really sorry. And he smiled at me and he said, thank you. And that was it. I still don't know to this day what he was angry about. But what I wanted out of that was a good working relationship. What I didn't need out of that was to punish him for the behaviour that he'd done, or to make him go through exactly what had made him angry in order that he would have to go through it and explain himself to me. I didn't need that. What I needed was a good working relationship, and that's what I got with him. I did deliberately tell him I didn't know what had made him angry, because if I then did the same thing again, I didn't want him thinking that I was just being bad. But actually, he never got angry at me again. So I have no idea still what that was about, but we had a good working relationship and we worked really well together from that point. So the last scenario of the experiment. John and Steve are friends who share a competitive streak. They frequently play tennis. One day when they're playing, Steve is easily beating John, 2 games in a row. And John gets really frustrated by this. So he returns the ball particularly hard, and it hits Steve in the eye. So how blameworthy is John for his behaviour? Red or green? Okay, so there's quite a lot of green. And how much punishment does he deserve? Oh, red. Is that the death penalty? So, again, we roughly agree here. So different levels. So people have a really different feel for how blameworthy John was in this situation. These guys were scoring between 0 and 9. So we obviously got a lot more grades than we get with you. So some people thought he wasn't blameworthy at all and that he didn't deserve any punishment, through to very blameworthy but still not much punishment, through to one person agreeing with you that it's obviously does deserve quite a bit of punishment, really. So what are all of these experiments about? Why do I keep asking you those questions? Well, there was a study that was done last year. It was completed and was published, which was looking at the levels of blameworthiness and the level of punishment that people wanted to give. And there was a theory that the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex in people's brains actually controls the amount of punishment that we want to give people. So what they did was they put an electromagnetic coil on people's heads before testing them. Sometimes they turned it on and sometimes they didn't. When they turned it on, it dampened the activity in this area of the brain. So then they asked them the questions we've been asking you, lots more, not just those, but lots of those are actual questions from the experiment. So they were looking at how blameworthy John was and how much punishment he deserved. And what they found was that how blameworthy he was stayed the same, whether or not that area of the brain had been affected. But how much punishment people wanted to give them went down across the board. So if that area of the brain had less activity, people wanted to punish less, even though they understood the blameworthiness at the same level. Now, this is really interesting. One of the things that we could look at is people who actually decide on punishment for a living, judges, passing sentence, those sorts of things. Perhaps we should be measuring the level of their activity in that part of the brain to understand that maybe someone is far more likely to give harsher punishments than somebody else. But also, what it says to me is, if that's just a function of my brain that makes me want to punish more, well, that's a choice that I have. That wish to punish, I might have a really strong wish to punish, but that's a choice that I have, if that's purely about the activity in that part of my brain. I also think that there's a piece of equipment we should install in all IT areas everywhere, and that's this. Just above the door as everyone goes in. Right, so I have a manifesto for punishment-driven development. So finding out who's to blame over working collaboratively. Retribution over improving the process. Punishing mistakes over avoiding future mistakes. And venting emotions over achieving goals. So this is the manifesto I think a lot of us live by. Even in the agile world where we start talking about everyone's equal, everyone's in it together, all of these things, you still see a lot of these behaviors. You still see teams where they ostracize one member of the team. You still see managers asking who's to blame when something goes wrong. You still see people blaming themselves instead of saying, what can we do to stop this problem happening again? So I've kind of changed this into the people-driven development manifesto. Respecting people over trying to control people. Celebrating the mistakes over punishing the mistakes. I don't mean by that deliberately going out and creating mistakes, but when they happen, they're telling us something that's wrong in our process, in our system, in the way that we do things, where we can actually now fix that now that we know that's wrong. That's a good thing. Putting yourself in their place, understanding where they're coming from, over putting others in their place. Changing your behavior over changing someone else's behavior. You cannot choose how someone else should behave. You can stand back and get upset because they're not behaving the way you think they should. You cannot change that. But you can absolutely change your behavior to try and actually get the situation that you want out of that. That you are in control of. So rather than punishment-driven development, I'm putting forward people-driven development. And that was me. I'm Ivana Terrible on Twitter if you want to talk about this. And does anybody have any questions? Sorry. Who made the illustrations? Oh, not me. I got these off of Shutterstock, but I thought they were kind of cool. This one particularly makes me think of Jess. Any other questions? Anyone there?
The angry man. I'd expect the angry man to be more angry if I wouldn't know why he is angry. Wouldn't that also be a possibility?
Absolutely. So, with all of these things, you don't know how someone's going to react when you go up and try something. So when I talked about the yes but man, I tried lots and lots of things with him before I found something that worked. With the angry man, it happened to be the first thing I tried that worked with him, but it may not have worked, and then I would have had to have tried something else. So yes, because you can't choose their behavior, and you don't know what's going to work with them. And particularly in that scenario, I didn't know him. I was very new into that job. So often you know the person and you can kind of guess what might work with them. That was the first time I'd ever tried something like that. I guess that situation isn't very often. So I wasn't sure at all that that would work. I was just trying to find the least confrontational way of getting a good working relationship back with him. But yeah, he might not have been happy with it. Any other questions? Anyone in here think that they're guilty of any of the things that I've been talking about? Because I am. I'm guilty of them. And I've been talking about this and all of the personal Kaizen piece and things. I do things wrong every single day. And I stand back and go, oh, I wish I hadn't reacted emotionally to that. I should have just done this. But it's all about that journey, and it's all about actually saying, I might completely be in the right here, but that doesn't matter. What actually matters is, what do we need out of this situation? Okay, thank you very much.